Hello, Caleb Giroux. How are you?
What is up? I'm good. How are y'all?
Are you going hair gel now or a little something different? You look fantastic.
No, it's still wet, but
Okay,
appreciate it.
gotcha. We got a little too much headroom on Giroux and no headroom on Calhoun. Are we all trying to be at different levels here? Okay, so
Sorry,
let's
no, I was stretching. I
let's
was
bring
stretching my back.
let's bring Giroux's camera down just a little bit. Okay, so um, Tennessee recruiting wise, give me a big picture right now before I ask you about some specific players. And if you want to get on the message board, if you've got players you want to ask about, go ahead and get on board right now. But uh, Caleb Giroux, what do you make of Tennessee's recruiting and where they stand right now? I think they're around 11th best in the nation, according to 247 Sports. Correct me if I'm wrong, but seems to be going well, especially with a recent pickup of a lineman. Go ahead.
I agree. I mean, they're still trying to jump into the top 10, which is really like the big catapult thing they need to do for this class. But realistically, and surprisingly enough for Josh Heupel's offense, I feel like the main thing this class is missing is wide receivers. And you still have a couple, probably maybe three, if you want to say uncommitted, that have Tennessee in their top schools that we could see here soon. So I think they want another running back, and I think they need to pick up at least one wide receiver in this class for it to jump into the top 10 and then be what Josh Heupel and his staff want it to be.
Okay, so before I get to Amari Jefferson, who has announced when he will announce his commitment, he is a receiver at a Baylor in Chattanooga, and it's a natural transition. But let me throw this out to both of you guys. Is there a chance that receiver is the one position that Josh Heupel, Caleb Giroux, let me go with you, that Josh Heupel leans on the transfer portal more than any other position because he's got a year to see them in college football, and he also has something incredibly great to sell. You can step in and be a 1,000-yard receiver in one transition year. Could this be the position that Josh Heupel most leans on the transfer portal? You think?
I think it could be mainly because he probably doesn't want to settle at wide receiver. So you think about other positions, if you can't get the 5-star, 4-star, and there's a 3-star available that you still like, you can pick him up. Josh Heupel probably doesn't want to get a 3-star wide receiver, and then you have to make him a project for 2-3 years when in his offense you need receiver depth and they need to be instant impacts. So I don't doubt that he'll use the transfer portal to pick up wide receivers. We saw him do it with Dante Thornton. And probably at wide receiver, that is not the worst plan if you can't get a good guy at a high school. But I really think it's just about not settling for lower ranked wide receivers and he's only getting guys that he wants and could see in his offense.
Well put. I know Caleb wants to jump in. If you've got any prospects again that you have a question about, put them in the chat and we'll throw them at Giroux and he will have a fantastic answer. So let's go to Amari Jefferson. Been committed to Tennessee's baseball team since June 2021. On the football side of things, competition is a little bit different. Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee after the 4-star wide receiver. Those are the top three schools. He set a commitment date for August the 5th. So how do you weigh the baseball commitment? Is it really anything anymore?
Right now, I don't think so. The only thing we could say about the baseball commitment is just that he enjoys Tennessee's campus enough and the facilities to commit to baseball. And we know the athletic facilities overlap a lot for baseball, football. So I guess you could say that. But realistically, he's leaning more towards football now. And with that August 5th commitment date, that'll give him a week. So I think he's going to visit Tennessee at least once more. And he'll probably go to Georgia and Alabama just to get a last look before he commits on August 5th. But with his commitment, like you said, it's getting a lot more, getting a lot tighter than his baseball commitment was. And it seems almost that he's swaying more towards an Alabama or Georgia than Tennessee right now.
Before we get to Calhoun, Rocky Top Tom asked update on Mike Matthews. What can you tell us about Matthews?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably see a commitment from Matthews here late July, early August. I'm pretty sure he's a guy who wants to commit before his senior football season to kind of get out the way so he can just play football during his senior year. But he's one of the guys we just talked about where Heupel is not going to settle for a receiver they don't want. And Mike Matthews is a guy that could probably pick up and put in as a freshman or sophomore. He's got a build that fits the offense, 6'1", 180. He's a 5-star, really good prospect out of Georgia, the number 4 wide receiver in this class. And he'd probably be the top prospect in this class at all that could catapult him into the top 10. So Mike Matthews is a guy they want, and he's a guy that they can probably land if they keep recruiting him after this dead period. And I really think they just have to beat out Clemson and USC for him.
Before I want to ask you guys both about a recruiting strategy that I think may be a little bit different. But first, Jaru, I just want to ask you a hypothetical real quick. Because the thing I love about Jaru in his youth is he's not clouded by nostalgia, unlike Dave over here. And so, Jaru,
Goodness,
it's a playoff game. And the matchup of the game is an all-pro cornerback versus an all-pro wide receiver. And the all-pro wide receiver gains 192 yards and scores 2 touchdowns through the air. You'd say the all-pro cornerback played pretty horrible in that game, right?
Who won the game?
Well, the quarterback's team won the game, but the receiver he was guarding had 192 yards and a touchdown. And 2 touchdowns. You would say they won the game in spite of the cornerback then, right?
I mean, it's hard because the cornerback is not, believe it or not, no matter how much Jalen Ramsey wants to say it, the cornerback is not the only guy tasked with guarding that wide receiver.
Well, in this case, it was
he might get burned over the top because his safety was sleeping.
In this case, it was the case because Deion Sanders was tasked with guarding Michael Irvin, and he gave up 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. What an awful game! San Francisco beat Dallas in spite of Deion Sanders in 1995. Okay, so just want to bring that up.
It's the it was the 94 season, pretty torrid comeback. Let me ask you about some of these prospects that you wrote about recently and what Tennessee needs. So you wrote about the interior defensive line, wide receiver, who we've addressed, and running back. So let me go with Williams Nwaneri, number 3 prospect in the nation. What do you think of him?
I wrote about interior defense because they do have a couple guys on the interior defensive line, but mainly a lot of theirs will end up being edge rushers. So Williams Nwaneri is a guy who would probably be, like we said before, when Amari Thomas graduates, he would be the guy you fill in because he's just a ready-to-play prospect out of Missouri, 6'5", 250-pound lineman. He's trending towards Georgia and Oklahoma right now. It seems like Tennessee might be third in his recruitment, but he seems like a guy where his recruitment will go long to his football season, so that gives Tennessee a chance to kind of get back in the race for him. And we've seen Josh Heupel use his connections in Missouri, and some of his staff use their connections in Missouri as well. So he's the number 1 lineman out of Missouri, and he could be a game changer if Tennessee picked him up.
What about Kamarion Franklin, number 4, 44th prospect in the nation? Visited Tennessee 3 times. That has to be a pretty good sign, right?
Yeah, and his recruitment is another one that will probably go into his football season. He's hinted at maybe making a decision before, but then he locked in an official visit with Auburn for September. So I figure we'll probably have to wait a little longer for his recruitment. And he's a guy who's probably kept the cards closer to the vest. You know, he's out of Lake Morant in Mississippi, which is basically Memphis. So he's a 6'5", 265-pound lineman. He obviously holds Tennessee in high regards. Like you said, he's visited them a ton. But he's got an official plan to Auburn, and it's kind of been a Tennessee-Auburn thing really with him. So I'm interested to see where his recruitment goes, and we'll probably find out a lot more about him once the dead period ends and we kind of get into football season.
Discuss, if you can, along with an update on Braylon Russell, the running back who had been committed to Arkansas, what you think that Josh Heupel's philosophy is in recruiting running backs.
Yeah, so Peyton Lewis, who's been peer recruiting Braylon Russell and committed since the end of May, he's kind of said that Jerry Mack and Josh Heupel have called him and Braylon Russell thunder and lightning. So speed, and then Braylon Russell would kind of be the more third down back with the bigger body. So I feel like that's kind of Josh Heupel's mantra. If you see the last couple classes, he takes 2 running backs, and he's tried to get like a Khalifa Keith where one of them can be a third down back that you can trust to get 2-3 yards, because Princeton Fant's gone. And I don't think in the future Josh Heupel wants to rely on his tight end to do that anyway. So I feel like we're going to see Josh Heupel recruit the faster running back like a Peyton Lewis, who's a state champion track runner, and then a bigger guy like Braylon Russell. Now, Braylon Russell, like you said, was committed to Arkansas, and it seems to be that he's trending back to Arkansas again. So his announcement will come tomorrow, and this is probably one of the closer recruitments we've seen in this cycle. But right now, I probably have to give Arkansas the edge just because he's an in-state guy, and it seems like he's trending back to the Razorbacks. But it's 51-49 right now for him.
Wow. And when is that announcement again?
That's tomorrow evening.
And do we know what time yet? Eastern Standard?
I think it's 6 or 7. He's going on the 247 Sports show to announce. So it'll be whatever time that is at.
Interesting. So Tennessee could pick up a prospect tomorrow. Other than that, I want to ask you who you feel really good about on Tennessee's board, and Drew's recruiting update, which is just fantastic, and he's been all over it, is brought to you by our friends at Craft Treats. Go to crafttreats.com, use the promo code Off the Hook. That's the promo code Off the Hook. You save 20% on their pet treats, and they also have the chill pills with the CBD that will help with your pet's digestive issues, anxiety issues, or maybe even arthritis. Crafttreats.com. Support our advertisers and our sponsors. Crafttreats.com. Use the promo code Off the Hook. So, Drew, give me 3 guys that you feel, and it can be somebody you've already mentioned too, but you feel pretty good will be Vols eventually.
Yeah, I feel like Mike Matthews is one of those guys that can be a Vol eventually. Like, he's been to campus several times, and he's been a guy that is consistently looks like he could be a lock and has consistently talked well about Tennessee, visited Tennessee often. And Josh Heupel's offense is a very easy thing to recruit. I mean, you just put on the tape and that's it, because, I mean, you can't really argue with his success on offense, his success with wide receivers. He got 2 drafted. That should be good enough for any wide receiver prospect to want to come. And then I would have to say my next one would be Edwin Spillman. He just recently announced that his top 2 schools are between Ohio State and Tennessee. Now, his might not be as cut and dry as we thought before. It seems his relationship with Ohio State is very tight, but his brother's still at Tennessee, still an in-state kid. I feel like that's going to be very hard to pass up to go north to Ohio State. And then third, I'll go with this is probably the farthest reach of the 3, but I'd say Camarion Franklin, just because his relationship with Rodney Gardner and some of the defensive staff is very strong right now. He's basically an in-state kid, 30 minutes south of Memphis, and he's been to Tennessee several times. And I feel like for him, if you can play in Tim Bake's defense, which will be, for defensive linemen, you put your foot in the ground and you get the quarterback. Or if you can go to Hugh Freeze and Auburn, which we have no idea what they'll look like, I feel like Tennessee will probably be the way he'll sway.
Can I ask a recruiting strategy to both you guys real quick? What y'all think?
Yes, I did want to make one reference to see if I could test Calhoun and show my age at the same time. Is Camarion Franklin at all related to Abreu Franklin? Do you remember that name, Calhoun?
Oh, wow. Wasn't he on the 2002 front 4?
Man, Calhoun, I hate you. You remember guys I covered better than I do. All right, get your recruiting philosophy here.
Okay, so you guys talked about maybe Heupel would do the transfer portal to get wide receivers because he doesn't want to settle for projects, and I would agree. But I wonder, what if the reverse happens now? What if, because Tennessee is such an attractive place to play receiver, in the age of NIL, do you think it's possible that Heupel can just easily now get like 3, 4, and 5-star receivers every year in his recruiting class, and not even have to use a lot of NIL money? Because let's be honest, receivers are going to come to Tennessee regardless of NIL because they realize that'll put them in the NFL. And then they can use that NIL money to go after a lot of transfers at the offensive line position or the defensive line position, where he may struggle a little bit more to recruit. Could it possible he does that strategy?
I think they have to beat Alabama and Georgia a couple years before that could actually take place. I think he has to be more solidified, because right now you still see, like an Amari Jefferson, where he's trending towards Alabama and Georgia, even though he is a wide receiver, and we have no idea who's playing quarterback for Alabama or Georgia in the future. So I feel like maybe in the future, yes, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. I just don't think they're there yet. We also haven't seen the wide receivers. They've gotten drafted, yes, but they haven't had success in the NFL. So it's easy to say you put wide receivers in the NFL and they haven't played a snap yet. So I feel like in a couple years we could see that maybe. But also in a couple of years, they could have so much NIL money, it doesn't matter, and we're having a conversation for no reason.